The morning of Friday, October 3, 2003, broke over Hoddesdon, Hertfordshire, with a crisp, indifferent autumn chill. For 32-year-old David Rolex King, it was just another day dictated by iron will and iron weights. A fanatical bodybuilder, his life was a testament to discipline and routine, a routine that revolved around the gym and the violent business that funded his lavish lifestyle. Shortly after 9:30 a.m., having sculpted and punished his muscles at the Physical Limits gym, King walked out into the car park with his friend and bodyguard, Ian Crocker. He was a veritable mountain of a man, standing 6'3" and weighing 18 stone of densely packed muscle. He was an intimidating presence, a man who had built a formidable career on violence and fear. But on this morning, his physical power meant nothing. As King headed towards his car, a white Ford Transit van, stolen for the occasion, slowed to a predatory crawl beside him. The passenger side window slid down. In that split second, King, a man who had lived his entire adult life by the sword, must have known he was about to die by it. There was no warning, no final exchange of words. There was only the deafening roar of a weapon built for war zones, not for the quiet car parks of suburbia. The passenger, Roger Vincent, unleashed a furious 3-second burst from a Hungarian-made AKS-47 assault rifle. 26 rounds of full metal jacket, armor-piercing ammunition tore through the air. 5 slammed into King's body with sickening force, ripping through his chest, arm, and leg, killing him instantly before he even hit the ground. Other bullets peppered his car and shattered the gym's brick wall, the high-velocity rounds punching through into the building and narrowly missing patrons inside. In what a judge would later call a classic drive-by assassination, the message was delivered with brutal finality. The van then screeched away, leaving behind a scene of shocking carnage and a mystery that would unravel a dark and twisted saga of betrayal, revenge, and underworld justice. David King's journey into the dark heart of the British underworld began not in the grimy back alleys of London, but in the sweat-soaked gyms of Essex. A Glaswegian by birth, King was intensely ambitious and fiercely dedicated to bodybuilding. It was this shared passion that led him into the orbit of Tony Tucker, a key figure in the infamous Essex Boys gang, who ran a North London shop selling muscle-building supplements. The two men bonded over their mutual interest in physical culture, and Tucker saw in King's imposing physique and innate capacity for violence a valuable, raw asset. Soon, King was working alongside Tucker as a minder for the former WBC super middleweight boxing champion, Nigel Benn. The job offered a tantalizing taste of the high life, granting him access to celebrities and a veneer of respectability. But the real money and power lay in Tucker's primary business, controlling the security, and by extension, the lucrative drug trade, in the nightclubs of Essex and East London. King quickly established a fearsome reputation as a doorman. He was not just a deterrent. He was a skilled and merciless fighter who enforced the gang's tight control over the sale of ecstasy and cocaine to the era's burgeoning rave culture. His capacity for violence was not just for show. It was his currency. During this period, King was sentenced to prison for a particularly savage assault in Stevenage, where he brutally beat a man and unceremoniously stuffed him into the boot of a car. He was a man who solved problems with his fists, and the underworld took notice. He was on a clear and violent trajectory, rising through the ranks of a dangerous criminal fraternity where brutality was the ultimate measure of a man. While King was serving his sentence, the landscape of the British underworld was irrevocably and bloodily altered. On the freezing night of December 6, 1995, his mentor Tony Tucker, along with his notorious criminal associates Pat Tate and Craig Rolfe, were found shot to death in a Range Rover parked on a quiet, snow-dusted farm track in the village of Rettendon. The execution was ruthlessly efficient. Rolfe was hit in the head, Tucker's face was obliterated by a shotgun blast, and Tate, in the back seat, had been shot in the stomach and head. The Rettendon murders became the stuff of underworld legend, a brutal coup that created a power vacuum that violent men from across London and Essex were eager to fill. Upon his release from prison, King found his old world gone its leaders buried. He needed a new home, a new firm, and he found it with the Canning Town firm, a notoriously violent outfit with deep and bloody roots in football hooliganism, particularly West Ham's feared intercity firm. It was here that King forged a close and dangerous friendship with Darren Pearman. Described by crime author and former Essex gangster Bernard O'Mahony as a raging lunatic, hidden behind a placid, almost nerdy exterior of cardigans and neatly parted hair, Pearman was dangerously unpredictable. O'Mahony noted of his ilk, if someone stamped on their foot, they got murdered. The alliance between the physically imposing King and the psychotically violent Pearman created a formidable and feared partnership, a union of brute force and unpredictable madness. The catalyst for a bloody cycle of revenge came not from a drug deal gone wrong or a turf war, but from a trivial dispute over respect that spiraled into chaos. According to underworld sources, the trouble began at Charlie Chan's nightclub in North London. An argument, allegedly started by King, escalated into a full-blown brawl. The club's head doorman, an ex-wrestler named Ronnie Fuller, intervened. Fuller was no pushover, and doing his job, he forcibly ejected both King and Pearman from the establishment. For men whose reputations were built on an image of untouchable hardness, this was a profound and public humiliation. It was a slight against their front, their underworld status, and it would not be forgotten. Weeks later, on October 4, 1999, exactly 4 years to the day before King's own death, the feud reignited at the Epping Forest Country Club. Pearman spotted Fuller at the club, and a second Usharshanit. More violent, chicken confrontation erupted. Eyewitnesses reported that Pearman's gang attacked Fuller with weapons, including a machete that had been strategically hidden in a sofa inside the club. But Fuller was a capable fighter. During the frenzied melee, he managed to wrestle the machete away from Pearman and, in the desperate struggle for his life, inflicted fatal injuries upon his attacker. Darren Pearman, bleeding profusely, was bundled into the back of a taxi and rushed to Whipps Cross Hospital, but he was pronounced dead on arrival. The simmering feud had finally boiled over into a homicide, and the rules of the underworld dictated that blood would demand blood. The underworld has its own inexorable code of justice. The Canning Town firm, in keeping with its reputation, refused to cooperate with the official police investigation into Pearman's murder. They announced they would sort it themselves. Ronnie Fuller knew he was a marked man. He moved from Loughton to Grays, Essex, in a desperate bid for safety, but as Bernard O'Mahony dryly put it, it had not been nearly far enough. On August 29, 2000, revenge was served cold and hard. A hitman on a motorbike pulled up outside Fuller's home and shot him twice in the head and 3 times in the chest, killing him instantly on his doorstep in front of his horrified wife. No one was ever convicted for the murder, but police suspected that the contract was ordered by Christopher Pearman, Darren's grieving and vengeful father. While this brutal war of attrition played out, King's own standing within the firm was becoming precarious. According to a former associate, John Rawlinson, King's arrogance and manipulative nature caused deep and bitter divisions. He systematically began to turn everybody against each other and caused a lot of bad feeling, Rawlinson said. King was becoming a liability, a toxic asset who generated as much internal trouble as he solved externally. By the early 2000s, David King had successfully carved out his own lucrative niche. He became heavily involved in the illicit trade of high-end stolen watches, a venture that earned him the moniker Rolex Dave. He also expanded his drug trafficking operations, importing large quantities of narcotics into the UK and running a notorious club in Stevenage called Renaissance, which authorities later shut down, calling it a drugs haven. The illicit profits were immense, allowing him to live in a $550,000 home and surround himself with the trappings of a successful, albeit criminal, career. But with great profit came great risk. In June 2002, a heroin shipment worth £100,000 was intercepted by customs. King and 4 of his associates, including a one-time friend named David Sharma, were arrested. What happened next sealed King's fate. While his co-defendants remained in custody, the proceedings against King, a father of 2, were inexplicably dropped at an early stage. In the paranoid and treacherous world of organized crime, where trust is a fatal weakness, there was only one possible explanation. As he was led from the courtroom, one of his co-defendants furiously shouted the ultimate curse, "He's a grass!" The accusation stuck. For months, the gang had feared they had been infiltrated by a police or customs informant. The ease with which King walked free pointed the finger directly at him. The poison of suspicion had been injected into the very heart of his criminal circle. David King was now the one being hunted. He knew the threat was real and ever-present. He began taking serious precautions, most notably wearing a bulletproof vest wherever he went. He believed the primary threat came from David Sharma, fearing his old friend would be pressured to testify against him to save his own skin. According to police intelligence, King put a contract out on Sharma's life to silence him permanently. Terrified of the 18-stone enforcer he once called a friend, Sharma fled the country. He went into hiding in the south of France, hoping distance would save him. But Sharma had loyal friends. 2 other men arrested in the drug seizure, Roger Vincent and David Smith, heard about the threat. They were serious underworld figures in their own right. Vincent, a feared gangland debt collector and fixer with a fearsome reputation for violence. They decided to strike first, offering to eliminate King not for payment, but purely out of loyalty to their friend, Sharma. Their first attempt was a failure. They hired a man from Manchester, Dean Spencer, to carry out the hit. On September 22, 2003, they tracked King to his home. But when the moment came, Spencer lost his nerve. He later told detectives, "When I saw how big he was and wearing that bulletproof vest, I knew my little gun would be useless against him." He backed out of the deal, leaving an enraged Roger Vincent to take matters into his own hands. Roger Vincent was not a man to be trifled with, nor one to accept failure. Furious that he would have to do the job himself, he enlisted his trusted associate, David Smith, to act as his driver. They knew about King's body armor, so they escalated their firepower accordingly. They acquired the Hungarian AKS-47 and loaded it with armor-piercing bullets, a weapon specifically chosen to render King's precautions utterly useless. They began to stalk their target, studying his routine with cold precision, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. That moment came on the morning of October 3, 2003. As King left the Physical Limits gym, feeling the satisfying pump of his workout, Vincent and Smith made their move. The white transit van pulled alongside him. Vincent opened fire, unleashing the devastating burst of automatic fire. The execution was as swift as it was brutal. King died instantly. His reign of terror brought to a definitive, violent end. The killers then sped away, torching the van and a stolen Mercedes getaway car in a field, confident they had destroyed all evidence. Despite their careful planning, the killers were sloppy. Near the smoldering wreck of the burnt-out van, police found a discarded plastic glove. Inside was a perfect, incriminating palm print belonging to David Smith. The day after the murder, a couple walking their dog by Braden Water in Great Yarmouth witnessed a man frantically hurling a red sports bag into the murky water. They retrieved the bag and called the police. Inside was a forensic gold mine: the AKS-47 murder weapon, spare ammunition, and 2 towels. A painstaking forensic analysis of the gun's curved ammunition clip revealed a trace of Smith's DNA. Saliva on one of the towels provided a definitive DNA match for Roger Vincent. Fibers found on the other towel were meticulously traced back to a unique jute rug at a flat used by Vincent. The final pieces of the puzzle fell into place through CCTV footage and mobile phone records. Police tracked their movements and, crucially, analyzed phone transmissions made just minutes after the shooting from Hoddesdon, to a number in the south of France. Vincent and Smith had called David Sharma to inform him that the deed was done. Vincent, who boasted to detectives of earning $250,000 in cash every year and who drove a $100,000 Aston Martin, was charged with murder. At trial, the evidence was overwhelming. Mr. Justice Wilkie described the crime as a thoroughly planned, ruthless, and brutally executed assassination. Roger Vincent was sentenced to serve a minimum of 30 years. David Smith received a minimum of 25 years. Dean Spencer, the man who lost his nerve, pleaded guilty to conspiracy to murder and was sentenced later. David Rolex King, the enforcer, the bully, the drug dealer, and the family man his parents remembered, was dead. His violent life had met an equally violent end, not in a grand battle, but in a hail of bullets in a quiet car park, a final, brutal consequence of the savage world he had helped to create.